Many believers sincerely pray for financial breakthrough. They ask God to remove the pressure of debt, to open doors of provision, and to guide them into a season of stability and peace. These prayers are often honest and heartfelt, coming from people who truly want to live responsibly, provide for their families, and experience the kind of financial peace the Bible often describes. Yet something confusing sometimes happens in the lives of many faithful people. Months pass, sometimes even years, and while the prayers continue and faith remains strong, the financial pressure does not seem to disappear. For many Christians, this creates a quiet frustration that they rarely speak about openly. They continue praying faithfully, but deep inside they begin asking questions that feel uncomfortable. They may wonder why prosperity appears to come easily to some people while others struggle constantly. They may notice that certain believers seem to experience financial stability while others remain trapped in cycles of pressure, debt, and uncertainty. Eventually, a deeper question begins forming in their mind. If God truly hears our prayers, why does financial struggle sometimes continue for so long? The Bible does not ignore this question. In fact, Scripture addresses it in a very practical way. Instead of presenting prosperity as something random or mysterious, the Bible repeatedly shows that financial stability is connected to patterns of wisdom. In other words, prosperity is rarely only about opportunity. It is often about direction. A person's financial future is not shaped only by what happens to them, but also by the daily decisions they make and the habits they repeat over time. Throughout the book of Proverbs, we see a powerful contrast between two different ways of living. One person lives guided by wisdom, patience, and discipline. The other lives guided by impulse, distraction, and short-term thinking. Both individuals may work hard, both may desire a better life, both may even pray sincerely for success. Yet the difference between their daily choices slowly creates completely different outcomes. The person guided by wisdom gradually builds stability. Their decisions may appear small and ordinary on a daily basis, yet those small decisions slowly create momentum. They learn to evaluate opportunities carefully, to avoid unnecessary risks, and to develop habits that protect their future instead of weakening it. Over time, these patterns quietly strengthen the foundation of their life. The other person may work just as hard and may pray just as sincerely, yet their daily decisions slowly weaken the very stability they are trying to build. Small choices that feel harmless in the moment begin accumulating into larger consequences. Impulsive spending, lack of planning, and reacting emotionally to financial pressure can gradually create a pattern that becomes difficult to escape. This is where many people begin to understand something important. Prayer alone does not replace wisdom. Prayer invites guidance, but wisdom must still be applied in daily life. When someone prays for financial breakthrough but continues repeating the same habits that created the pressure in the first place, the situation rarely changes. This does not mean God ignores their prayers. Instead, it often means that the transformation required for lasting change has not yet taken place. The Bible repeatedly shows that God often works through wisdom. He reveals principles that protect people from cycles of destruction. He reveals patterns that guide people towards stability. He reveals truths that, when applied consistently, slowly change the direction of a person's life. But those truths must first be recognized and then practiced. Knowledge alone does not change a life unless it begins influencing decisions. This is why Proverbs describes wisdom as something more valuable than silver or gold. Money can solve temporary problems, but wisdom prevents those problems from returning again. Without wisdom, financial relief can disappear quickly. With wisdom, even small opportunities can grow into something much greater over time. Understanding this principle changes the way a person views their financial life. Instead of searching only for a sudden miracle, they begin paying attention to the patterns guiding their daily decisions. They start asking different questions about their habits, their priorities, and the direction their life is moving. This shift in perspective is often the beginning of real change. The difference between financial chaos and financial stability is rarely one dramatic moment. It is usually the accumulation of daily decisions guided by wisdom. When those decisions begin to change, something powerful begins happening beneath the surface. The direction of a person's life begins changing as well. At first, these changes may appear small. A different decision here, a more careful choice there, a moment of patience where impulse once ruled. But as those small moments begin accumulating, they slowly reshape the entire direction of a person's financial life. This is the quiet power of wisdom. It rarely creates instant transformation, but it produces steady change over time. And when wisdom becomes part of daily life, the cycles that once felt permanent slowly begin losing their power. That is often the true beginning of financial breakthrough. Not when money suddenly appears, but when the direction of a person's decisions begins to change. Once people begin to understand that wisdom plays an important role in financial stability, another question naturally appears. If wisdom is so important, why do many believers continue struggling financially for long periods of time, even while working hard and praying faithfully? The answer is often not found in one dramatic mistake, but in a quiet pattern that slowly shapes a person's financial life without them fully realizing it. One of the most common patterns that weakens financial stability is the habit of reacting instead of planning. Many people live their financial lives in a constant state of reaction. When a bill arrives, they respond immediately to solve the pressure of that moment. When an unexpected expense appears, they rush to find a quick solution. When money becomes available, they often make decisions based on what feels urgent or emotionally satisfying in the present, rather than what strengthens their future. Over time, this reactive way of living slowly creates instability. Every decision becomes connected to the pressure of the moment rather than guided by a clear direction. Urgency begins controlling financial behavior. When urgency dominates decision-making, wisdom rarely has the time it needs to guide the outcome. The Bible repeatedly warns about this pattern in subtle ways. Proverbs often describes the difference between a wise person and a foolish person, not in terms of intelligence, but in terms of foresight. The wise person considers the future before acting. They think about the consequences of their choices. They observe patterns and adjust their behavior before small problems grow into larger ones. The foolish person, on the other hand, often acts only when pressure becomes unavoidable. Instead of preparing for what may happen tomorrow, they respond only when difficulty appears today. This pattern may feel normal because many people around them live the same way, but Scripture explains that living without foresight slowly weakens the stability of a person's life. Financial stability is rarely built through sudden decisions. It is built through awareness and preparation. When someone begins paying attention to where their money goes, how they respond to financial pressure, and what habits guide their decisions, they begin seeing patterns that were previously invisible. For example, many people underestimate the influence of small daily decisions. A purchase that feels insignificant in the moment may appear harmless. A small expense repeated many times over months or years can quietly drain resources that could have strengthened financial security. The issue is not always the size of the decision, but the consistency of the pattern behind it. This is why the Bible repeatedly encourages discipline. Discipline is not about restriction or punishment. It is about protecting the future from the consequences of careless decisions. When discipline becomes part of daily life, financial choices begin aligning with long-term stability instead of short-term emotion. Another habit that quietly damages financial stability is the desire for immediate comfort. Human nature naturally seeks relief from pressure. When financial stress appears, people often search for the fastest solution available. Sometimes that solution involves borrowing money, delaying responsibility, or making decisions that feel easier today but create heavier consequences tomorrow. The problem with immediate comfort is that it rarely solves the real issue. Instead, it often postpones it while increasing the weight of the problem. A decision that temporarily removes pressure may create even greater pressure later if the underlying pattern remains unchanged. The Bible encourages patience because patience allows wisdom to operate. When someone pauses before making a financial decision, they create space for reflection. They begin asking different questions. Instead of asking only what feels easiest right now, they begin asking what decision will strengthen their future. This shift may appear simple, yet it changes the entire direction of financial life. Decisions become intentional instead of reactive. Opportunities are evaluated with greater clarity. Risky choices that once felt attractive begin losing their influence. Over time, something powerful begins happening. The cycle that once felt uncontrollable starts weakening. Financial pressure that once seemed constant begins becoming more manageable. Instead of feeling trapped by circumstances, the person begins recognizing that their choices still carry influence over the direction of their life. This realization restores something many people lose during financial struggle: hope. Hope returns when a person understands that their future is not determined only by their past mistakes. It is also shaped by the decisions they begin making today. And when those decisions begin aligning with wisdom, patience, and discipline, the direction of life slowly begins changing. The cycle that once felt permanent begins loosening its grip. Stability begins forming quietly beneath the surface. This is why the Bible places such strong emphasis on wisdom. Wisdom does not only guide spiritual life, it also protects practical areas of life such as work, relationships, and finances. When someone begins applying biblical wisdom consistently, the results often appear gradually but powerfully. Small changes accumulate, new habits begin forming, and slowly the foundation of financial stability begins strengthening. Once a person begins recognizing the habits that quietly weaken financial stability, a new question naturally appears. If certain patterns can slowly create cycles of pressure and instability, what kind of patterns create the opposite result? What kind of decisions begin leading a person towards stability, peace, and long-term financial security? The Bible provides a clear answer through a principle that appears again and again throughout Scripture. This principle is simple to understand but powerful when applied consistently. It is the principle of stewardship. Stewardship means recognizing that the resources we manage are not random or meaningless. Instead, they are opportunities to practice wisdom and responsibility. When someone begins viewing money through the lens of stewardship, their relationship with finances begins changing immediately. Instead of seeing money only as something to spend or escape pressure with, they begin seeing it as something that must be guided carefully. Every financial decision becomes part of a larger direction. Each choice either strengthens the future or quietly weakens it. This perspective transforms the way people approach financial responsibility. Instead of asking how quickly they can remove the pressure of today, they begin asking how their decisions today are shaping tomorrow. The focus shifts from immediate comfort to long-term stability. The Bible illustrates this concept through many teachings about faithfulness. One of the most repeated themes in Scripture is the idea that those who are faithful with small things eventually become capable of managing greater things. This principle applies not only to spiritual responsibilities, but also to practical areas such as work, influence, and finances. Many people believe financial breakthrough must arrive suddenly in order to be real. They imagine a dramatic moment when everything changes overnight. Yet in reality, most lasting financial stability grows slowly. It grows through small acts of discipline repeated consistently over time. A person who practices stewardship begins noticing opportunities others often overlook. They begin managing small resources more carefully. They develop habits of awareness that allow them to see how their decisions influence the direction of their life. Over time, these habits create a kind of financial clarity that many people never experience. This clarity makes it easier to avoid decisions that would weaken stability. It also makes it easier to recognize opportunities that align with long-term growth rather than short-term excitement. Another important aspect of stewardship is gratitude. Gratitude changes how people view the resources they already have. Instead of constantly focusing on what they lack, they begin appreciating what they are able to manage right now. This shift in perspective reduces the pressure to chase quick solutions or risky opportunities that promise immediate relief. When gratitude and stewardship begin working together, something remarkable starts happening. Financial decisions become calmer and more intentional. Instead of reacting emotionally to pressure, people begin responding with wisdom and patience. Patience is a powerful ally of stewardship. Without patience, many people abandon wise decisions because they do not see immediate results. But financial stability, like many other forms of growth, often develops quietly beneath the surface before it becomes visible. Just as a seed takes time to grow before producing fruit, disciplined financial habits require time before their full impact appears. The person who understands this principle becomes less discouraged by slow progress. They recognize that consistency is more important than speed. Over time, the results begin appearing in unexpected ways. financial pressure becomes easier to manage, opportunities appear more clearly, confidence begins replacing the sense of helplessness that once dominated their thinking. The most powerful part of this transformation is that it changes not only the financial situation, but also the person themselves. They become more patient, more thoughtful, and more disciplined in the way they approach decisions. These qualities strengthen every area of life, not only finances. Eventually, many people reach a moment of realization. They notice that the cycle that once controlled their life no longer has the same power. The patterns that once led them toward pressure have been replaced by patterns that build stability instead. This is often the moment when financial breakthrough begins appearing in practical ways. Opportunities that once seemed distant begin becoming accessible. Progress that once felt impossible begins becoming visible. But by the time these external changes appear, something far more important has already taken place. The person has changed, their thinking has changed, their habits have changed, and because those internal changes have occurred, the stability they begin building now has the strength to last. That is why the Bible places such strong emphasis on wisdom and stewardship. These principles are not temporary solutions. They are foundations that support long-term stability and peace. And when someone begins living according to those principles, the direction of their life slowly begins transforming. What once felt like an endless cycle of pressure gradually becomes a path toward freedom, clarity, and financial peace. When people begin understanding these principles, something important starts changing in their mindset. Instead of seeing their financial situation as something completely outside of their control, they begin recognizing that their daily decisions still carry influence over the direction of their life. This realization alone can transform the way someone approaches financial pressure. Many individuals feel trapped in cycles of debt because they believe the situation is permanent. They assume that their past mistakes have already determined their future. But the Bible repeatedly reminds us that the future is shaped by the choices we begin making today. The past may explain how someone arrived at their current situation, but it does not have to define where they go from here. Breaking a financial cycle rarely begins with a dramatic event. It usually begins with awareness. A person begins paying closer attention to their habits, their priorities, and the patterns guiding their decisions. They start noticing where money flows, how they react to financial pressure, and which choices strengthen their stability versus those that quietly weaken it. This awareness creates the opportunity for change. Once a person sees the patterns clearly, they can begin adjusting them. Instead of repeating the same habits that created pressure, they begin forming new habits that gradually lead towards stability. One of the most powerful changes many people make is learning to pause before making financial decisions. That pause creates space for wisdom to operate. Instead of reacting immediately to every situation, the person begins evaluating the long-term consequences of their choices. A purchase that once seemed harmless may now appear unnecessary. A financial risk that once felt exciting may now appear dangerous. An opportunity that once seemed insignificant may now reveal its long-term value. Over time, these small shifts begin transforming the entire financial landscape of a person's life. Another key step in breaking the cycle of financial pressure is learning to separate needs from desires. This distinction can be difficult because modern culture constantly encourages people to pursue comfort, convenience, and immediate satisfaction. Advertisements, social expectations, and social media often create the impression that a successful life requires constant consumption. But the Bible presents a different perspective. Scripture consistently emphasizes contentment, wisdom, and responsible stewardship. Contentment does not mean abandoning ambition or refusing to pursue improvement. Instead, it means learning to appreciate what we already have, while making wise decisions about what we truly need. When contentment begins guiding financial decisions, something remarkable happens. The constant pressure to keep up with others begins fading. The urge to spend money in order to feel successful begins losing its power. Financial choices become calmer, more thoughtful, and more aligned with long-term stability. Another powerful principle that helps break financial cycles is consistency. Many people attempt to change their financial life through sudden bursts of discipline that last only a short time. They create strict plans, push themselves intensely, and expect immediate results. When progress appears slower than expected, frustration begins replacing motivation. But lasting change rarely happens through sudden intensity. It usually happens through steady consistency. Small decisions repeated daily often produce far greater results than dramatic efforts that disappear after a few weeks. A person who consistently practices wise financial habits gradually builds momentum. Momentum is powerful because it changes how progress feels. At first, discipline may feel uncomfortable or restrictive, but as momentum builds, wise habits begin feeling natural. Over time, the financial pressure that once dominated everyday life becomes less overwhelming. Bills become easier to manage. Savings begin forming slowly. Opportunities that once seemed impossible begin appearing more realistic. Perhaps the most encouraging part of this journey is the way it restores confidence. Many people who struggle financially begin losing confidence in their ability to manage money wisely. Each mistake reinforces the belief that they are incapable of creating stability.